The morning skyline of downtown emerged like a collection of steel monuments, each building competing for dominance against the pale dawn. Among them stood the headquarters of Veritech Industries, a corporate giant that had spent the last decade reshaping the landscape of autonomous vehicle technology. At precisely 7:30 a.m. on a Tuesday that would become permanently etched into the city's history, a young man pushed through the revolving doors at the main entrance. His name was Marcus Chen. He was 19 years old, and almost nobody in that building had any idea they were about to meet the person who had just fundamentally changed the trajectory of their company's future. Marcus wore what some might call deliberately humble attire, a navy hoodie that had seen better days, paired with dark jeans and white athletic shoes that cost less than a single lunch in the building's executive dining room. His backpack was simple, unbranded, the kind of thing you could buy at any airport store for $30. To the untrained eye, he might have looked like an intern, a delivery person, or perhaps a student who had wandered into the wrong building entirely. The truth was far more complicated and far more extraordinary. He carried with him documentation that would reshape everything about the company he was approaching. Inside his bag lay the contracts, the transfer agreements, and the binding financial documents that represented an investment so substantial it could literally save the entire organization from the brink of complete financial collapse. The lobby of Veritech was a study in controlled chaos during morning hours. Professionals in tailored suits swept past security checkpoints with practiced efficiency. Their badges, color-coded and laminated, granted them immediate passage. Assistants hurried behind their executives, clutching tablets and coffee cups, whispered conversations about quarterly targets and market projections. The energy was electric, with the kind of professional urgency that only corporate environments could generate. Marcus approached the reception desk, where a woman in her late 40s sat behind a sleek glass partition. Her name was Diana, and she had worked at Veritech for 7 years. She looked up from her computer screen with the practiced smile of someone who performed this greeting hundreds of times daily. "Good morning," Marcus said, his voice steady and clear. "I have a scheduled meeting with the board of directors at 8 a.m. Diana's fingers hovered over her keyboard. Her eyes performed the subtle assessment that all receptionists develop over time, a quick scan of clothing, demeanor, and overall appearance that unconsciously categorized visitors into mental boxes. The smile shifted slightly, becoming more polite but somehow less warm. "May I have your name, please?" "Marcus Chen." She began typing, her expression shifting from neutral to slightly puzzled as she scanned through the appointment system. Before her search could proceed any further, a voice cut through the morning bustle like a sharp blade. The tone carried absolute authority and absolute disdain simultaneously. "Excuse me," a man approached from the direction of the executive elevators. He was tall, commanding, with the kind of physical presence that seemed to part crowds like water. His name was Victor Ashford, and he held the title of Chief Executive Officer at Veritech Industries. His suit alone probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Charcoal fabric that had been tailored with obsessive precision, paired with a silk tie that seemed to absorb light. His silver hair was styled with the kind of perfection that suggested a weekly appointment with a private barber. Victor's eyes swept over Marcus with an expression that suggested he was examining something the cleaning crew had missed. "Are you lost, young man?" Victor's tone was the particular brand of cold that comes from complete certainty of one's own superiority. Marcus maintained his composure with the kind of discipline that would have impressed a Zen monk. "No, sir. I'm here for my 8 a.m. appointment with the board." Victor's laugh was sharp and brief, the sound of someone utterly amused by a joke that only he understood. He turned slightly toward Diana at the reception desk. "Diana, did we have any student tours scheduled for this morning? Or perhaps someone's child bringing them to work?" "I don't believe so, sir," Diana replied, suddenly looking uncomfortable and unsure. "I suggest you stop wasting everyone's time," Victor said, his attention returning to Marcus. "This isn't a place where people like you simply walk in and pretend to have importance. We run serious operations here. I'm not pretending anything," Marcus replied, keeping his voice level.
"I have an appointment."
Victor shook his head with the dismissive gesture of someone who had made a final decision. "Security," he called out, his voice projecting across the marble floor of the lobby. "Please escort this young man out of the building." Two security officers appeared almost immediately. They had clearly been stationed throughout the lobby, ready for precisely this kind of situation. One was younger, perhaps, in his early 30s, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested this was one of his first weeks in the job. The second was different entirely. His name was Marcus Voss, and his presence immediately changed the atmosphere of the space. Voss was a man who had spent his previous 2 decades in the military. His bearing reflected that background in every deliberate movement. Scars mapped out stories across his knuckles, the kind of physical evidence that indicated a past filled with violence and conflict. His eyes held the flat, analytical quality of someone who had learned to assess threats and make split-second decisions about people. "There's been a misunderstanding," Marcus said calmly, holding his ground. "The only misunderstanding is your assumption that you belong here," Victor replied, his gaze already drifting away to more important matters. The elevator chimed, announcing the arrival of another passenger. A second executive emerged, this one shorter than Victor, but somehow managing to project an almost equal amount of arrogance. His name was David Rothstein, and he served as the chief operating officer. His suit probably cost even more than Victor's, the kind of clothing designed to announce wealth and status to anyone with even the most basic understanding of fashion. "Something wrong, Vic?" Rothstein asked, his eyes settling on Marcus with obvious contempt. "Just removing some confusion," Victor said. "This young man seems to have the impression that he can access the executive levels of our building." Rothstein's smile was the kind that made the temperature in the room feel like it had dropped several degrees. "And how exactly did someone like you manage to reach this floor?" The emphasis on certain words was deliberate, calculated to sting. Marcus felt the familiar heat of anger beginning to rise in his chest. "Someone like you." He had heard those words before, understood their meaning perfectly, recognized the undertones of prejudice and dismissal that came bundled inside the phrase like a toxic package. "I took the elevator," Marcus answered, keeping his response simple and honest. Rothstein's face flushed with the kind of anger that comes from perceived disrespect. "Are you getting smart with me, kid?" The word kid landed like a slap across the face, heavy with the weight of every dismissal and disrespect that came with being young and black in spaces that were not designed for him. "I'm being truthful," Marcus said. His expression remained calm even as his internal temperature rose. Voss stepped forward, and his voice came out with the flat authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question or negotiation. "Empty your bag. I can show you my identification," Marcus offered. "Empty it." Now, Marcus unzipped his backpack. Voss pulled the contents out with deliberate slowness, examining each item as though it might be evidence in a crime scene. A laptop, notebooks, charging cables, a phone, everything was inspected, analyzed, judged. The performance was deliberate, designed to humiliate, to demonstrate absolute power over the situation. "Where's your visitor badge?" Voss demanded. "I haven't received one yet." Voss looked at Victor. Victor nodded with the subtlest gesture. Voss produced a plastic zip tie and secured Marcus's backpack with the finality of someone locking up evidence. "You'll get this back when you leave the building." The elevator opened again, and this time it was a flood. Investors, board members, senior executives, all of them dressed in the uniform of serious wealth. Their suits gleamed under the lobby lights, their handshakes were confident, their greetings warm and welcoming. Victor's entire demeanor shifted like he had flipped a switch. His voice became warm, almost familial, his posture relaxed into something that suggested genuine pleasure at seeing these arrivals. "Gentlemen, welcome right on schedule, as always. Please let me escort you to the boardroom personally." Marcus watched as these titans of industry disappeared into elevators, receiving the kind of treatment he had been denied. An older woman appeared at the periphery of his vision. Her name was Catherine, and she was an executive assistant. She moved with the careful precision of someone attempting to prevent a disaster. "Sir, perhaps I should verify the appointment records," Catherine suggested to Victor. "Just to be absolutely certain." "Don't bother yourself, Catherine." Victor interrupted, his voice carrying that icy tone reserved for people he considered beneath his attention. "Some individuals come into this building every single day, pretending that they belong somewhere they haven't earned their way into. It's a pattern we see repeatedly." More investors arrived, wave after wave of them, each one receiving the white-glove treatment that Marcus had been denied. each one getting personal attention, warm greetings, immediate elevator access. A woman approached the security checkpoint. She was in her mid-50s, moving with the careful precision of someone carrying some invisible burden. Her professional clothing was neat and appropriate, but distinctly less expensive than what the other executives wore. Her name was Rachel Torres, and Marcus had researched her extensively. She was a senior safety engineer at Veritech, one of the few people in the entire organization who actually understood the technical details of the company's most sensitive projects. Rachel glanced at Marcus briefly. Her eyes held something he recognized immediately. She understood his situation. She had been in similar positions before. Fear, yes, but also something else, a kind of knowing recognition of injustice. Voss guided Rachel through security without searching anything. She received none of the humiliation, none of the deliberate degradation. She simply walked into an elevator and disappeared upward. "Take a seat," Voss said, pointing to a single chair against the wall. "Wait there." Marcus sat. The chair was deliberately uncomfortable, clearly designed to send a message, a reminder that he didn't belong, that his presence was tolerated only through sufferance, that every moment spent in this chair was a statement about his place in this world. Victor gathered the investors near the elevator bank, and their conversation carried across the marble lobby with the casual confidence of people who didn't worry about being overheard. "Incredible what the right investment can accomplish," one of them said, his voice carrying genuine admiration. $300 million. That's the kind of capital injection that transforms everything. "Indeed," Victor replied, his chest swelling with visible pride. "And get this, the investor has agreed to maintain complete anonymity. No board representation demands, no interference with our operations whatsoever, complete trust in my leadership." Marcus felt his hands tighten against the armrest. That was his money they were discussing. $300 million of his capital, transferred just hours ago from his personal accounts. The investment that was meant to save this company from complete financial destruction. And they were talking about it as though Victor had personally arranged it, as though he had pulled off some brilliant financial maneuver. The elevator doors closed. Victor Rothstein and all the investors disappeared upward. Marcus remained in his uncomfortable chair, his eyes fixed on the lobby clock. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. Catherine approached cautiously, wringing her hands with genuine concern. "Sir, I really should try to verify your appointment details. There may have been a clerical error, and—" "Don't worry about him, Catherine." Victor's voice echoed down from somewhere in the building. He must have returned to grab something he'd forgotten, because he stepped out of an elevator just moments after speaking through an intercom system. A briefcase sat on the reception desk. He grabbed it and turned his attention to Marcus one final time. "Still here?" Victor asked, his tone suggesting genuine disbelief that Marcus would maintain his presence. "I have a confirmed meeting with the board of directors," Marcus replied. "With whom specifically?" The board. Victor's laugh was sharp again, a sound of absolute contempt. "The board? You think you can simply walk into this building and demand an audience with important people? Let me explain something to you." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Marcus could hear, though his tone suggested he didn't particularly care if others were listening. "This isn't a community center. This isn't some place where your feelings matter or where you belong. This is a serious business environment. People like you need to understand that certain places are off limits to certain types of people, and this is one of them." "People like me?" Marcus asked quietly. "You understand exactly what I mean?" Victor said, his eyes flashing with something dangerous. He returned to the elevator before the doors could close. He turned back and spoke loudly enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "Catherine, why don't you let him wait a while longer? He needs to learn patience. Some people aren't born understanding their place in the world, but waiting can be an excellent teacher." The elevator doors sealed shut with a soft chime that felt like a period at the end of a sentence. Marcus sat alone in his uncomfortable chair, watching the minutes tick away on the lobby clock. 9 a.m. arrived and passed. His scheduled meeting had begun without him. Time moved slowly from that point forward. The lobby traffic shifted and changed as the morning progressed. Different people came and went. Different conversations echoed off the marble, but nothing changed for Marcus. He remained in his chair, spine straight, hands resting calmly on his knees. Above him, A security camera tracked his every movement, its red recording light blinking steadily. Through the glass walls that separated the main lobby from the executive level, Marcus could see silhouettes moving inside the boardroom. That was where his meeting was happening. Without him, minutes crawled into hours. Preston Hale, one of the other senior executives, descended from the boardroom at one point and walked directly past Marcus with deliberate slowness. His gaze swept over Marcus from head to toe, a visual assessment that was meant to communicate complete disdain. "Still waiting, I see," Preston said, his voice loud enough to carry across the lobby. "That's adorable. Simply adorable." Preston walked to Catherine's desk and spoke with the kind of volume that ensured everyone in the vicinity would hear every word. "You know what I find fascinating? Kids who think that dressing in business casual and walking into a corporate building somehow makes them important. It's like playing dress-up, isn't it? Pretending to be something they're not." Preston glanced back at Marcus. "Look at those shoes, probably picked them up at a discount outlet somewhere. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but it does communicate something, doesn't it?" Marcus's sneakers were indeed inexpensive. He had chosen them deliberately, clean, practical, comfortable for a long day of walking and standing. The choice had been made consciously, a decision to put comfort above appearance. But sitting there, being evaluated and judged by people who would never know the reasoning behind his choices, Marcus understood how that judgment worked. Visual assessment as character evaluation. Preston returned to the boardroom. Marcus counted the minutes. 12 minutes passed, 15, then 20. By the 30-minute mark, Voss approached Marcus once again. "I need to conduct another security search," he announced. "You already searched my bag." Marcus pointed out, "Company protocol. Random additional screenings as needed." Voss's explanation was delivered as though it were simply fact, not to be questioned or debated. Marcus stood slowly. Voss dumped the contents of his backpack onto the reception desk once again. The same laptop, the same notebooks, the same charging cables, everything exactly as it had been. "Where's your visitor badge? You confiscated it." "That's correct. And you don't receive it back until someone confirms that you actually belong here." Voss's smile was cold and calculated, a promise of worse treatment to come if Marcus was to resist or complain. "Resisting another search will result in your immediate removal from the building." "I'm not resisting." Voss returned the items carelessly, unconcerned with how they landed. Marcus's notebook fell to the floor. He bent down to retrieve it, ignoring the camera above that tracked his every movement. 30 minutes turned into 45. Marcus rose from his chair and walked toward the boardroom doors. 2 security officers materialized beside him instantly, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that suggested they had practiced this exact scenario dozens of times before.
"Back to your seat," one of them ordered. "The board is expecting me." Marcus said quietly, "Nobody's expecting you."
The second guard replied. He placed a firm hand on Marcus's shoulder, applying just enough pressure to communicate that this was not a suggestion or a request. "Move." When Marcus hesitated even slightly, both guards stepped closer. The first one pushed him backward, not with violent force, but with enough deliberate pressure to send an unmistakable message. This was not a place where Marcus had power or agency. This was a place where he did what he was told, when he was told to do it. Marcus returned to his chair. The guards remained nearby, arms crossed, making clear that any further attempts at movement would be met with immediate intervention. Victor appeared in the boardroom doorway at one point, speaking to someone behind him with the kind of projection designed to ensure his words reached the lobby. "This occurs more frequently than you might expect," he said to his companion. "Young black men walk into corporate buildings operating under the assumption that sheer confidence will somehow substitute for legitimate credentials and earned access. They watch success stories on television, they see people who made it, and they believe they can fabricate their way into opportunity. What they don't grasp is that real achievement requires years of genuine effort, proper educational background, and established connections within the industry. You can't simply demonstrate up and demand respect." His companion nodded sagely, absorbing this wisdom as though it had never been articulated before. They disappeared back into their meeting. Marcus sat in silence, his mind working through multiple layers simultaneously. He studied everything around him with the precision of someone making inventory. The color-coding system of the different badges, blue for senior executives, green for regular staff, red for security, white for temporary visitors. The rotation patterns of the guards, changing positions every 20 minutes in a predictable cycle. The way Rachel Torres kept glancing through the glass walls of the boardroom, her expression growing more troubled with each passing hour. By the time 2 hours had elapsed, Marcus had mentally mapped out the entire security infrastructure of the building. He understood the weak points, the blind spots, the places where the cameras didn't quite reach. He knew where he could access the building's internal systems, how long it would take to move through different areas without detection, and what he would need to do to find the information he was actually searching for. But he waited. Patience was a skill that his father had taught him years ago, before everything had fallen apart. Wait for the right moment. Understand the situation completely before you act. Let your opponent reveal themselves through their own arrogance. An hour became 2, 2 became nearly 3. Through the glass walls, Marcus watched Victor stand at the head of the conference table. The CEO's voice occasionally rose loud enough to penetrate the soundproofing of the boardroom. "Gentlemen, I'm pleased to inform you that Veritech has been rescued from financial ruin." Victor's words carried obvious pride and satisfaction. "An anonymous investment fund, Zenith Capital Holdings, has transferred $300 million into our operating accounts. This capital injection will not only stabilize our current operations, but will allow us to aggressively expand into new market segments." Applause rippled through the boardroom. Marcus heard it even from his position in the lobby, muffled by glass but unmistakable. Victor was basking in the congratulations, accepting accolades like he had personally secured the investment through his own genius and persuasiveness. "I negotiated this deal myself," Victor continued, his voice growing stronger and more confident. "The investor was impressed by my strategic vision for Veritech's future. More importantly, they have agreed to maintain complete anonymity and non-interference. They trust my leadership completely." When Victor finished speaking, he looked directly through the glass wall at Marcus. Their eyes met for the briefest moment. Victor's expression held pure, smug satisfaction, the expression of a man who believed he had successfully defeated his opponent. Marcus reached into his wallet. From one of the interior pockets, he retrieved a second identification card. He stood slowly, ignoring the guards who immediately moved to intercept him. "Hey, sit back down," one of them commanded. But Marcus walked directly toward the boardroom doors instead. His hand closed around the handle. The conference room door opened with a soft click. Marcus stepped into the space during what appeared to be the height of Victor's celebration. 12 board members sat around a polished table, crafted from what looked like imported mahogany. Several investment bankers and financial consultants occupied chairs along the walls. Every single person turned toward the interruption, their expressions shifting from celebration to confusion to annoyance. Victor's face immediately flushed deep red. "What do you think you're doing? Security! Security! Get this kid out of here right now!" Voss moved toward Marcus, his body language communicating that he was ready to use whatever force was necessary to remove this interruption. But Marcus stood perfectly still, holding his position between his fingers. He held a business card with the kind of care that suggested it was infinitely precious. Board Chair Eleanor Harmon squinted at the card. Her expression transformed in stages: confusion, then recognition, then visible shock. "Wait," she said sharply. "Stop." Eleanor's voice carried enough authority that Voss paused mid-movement. She stood slowly, her eyes fixed on the emblem emblazoned on the business card. It matched the investor documentation spread across the conference table. The same design, the same symbol, the same unmistakable identity. "Zenith Capital Holdings. My name is Marcus Chen," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "I'm the founder and sole owner of Zenith Capital Holdings. $300 million transferred from my accounts into this company's financial structure this morning at 9:15. The room fell silent. Someone's coffee cup rattled against a saucer. Papers rustled as people instinctively began looking for verification, for confirmation that what they were hearing was actually true. "I'm also the creator of Navigat AI," Marcus continued, "the traffic prediction and navigation platform currently operating in 53 cities across North America and Europe." Victor's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air, searching for words that wouldn't come. Navigate AI was valued at $5.2 billion after our most recent funding round, Marcus said. His voice remained calm, but every word carried weight. That valuation makes me, at 19 years old, America's youngest self-made billionaire. The investment bankers began exchanging glances. Several board members reached for their phones, ready to verify these claims through whatever channels they had access to. Eleanor's face had gone pale. She sank slowly back into her chair. Marcus allowed a moment of silence to settle over the room. Then he continued. I've been sitting outside in your lobby for 3 hours. Your security director confiscated my identification. Your CEO refused to verify my appointment. I was searched, questioned about my legitimacy, and informed repeatedly that people like me don't belong in corporate buildings. He turned his attention specifically to Victor. Your chief operating officer suggested that I was probably here to deliver food. Multiple employees walked past me laughing. I heard you tell Catherine to let me wait another 2 hours to teach me patience. Your exact words were that people like me need to understand certain fundamental truths about the world. Rothstein's smug grin had completely vanished. His face had gone pale, and his hands were visibly trembling. The hallway security footage has already been backed up to my personal servers, Marcus continued, along with every audio recording from the reception area, every single conversation, every insult, every dismissal. Eleanor stood abruptly. Victor, your authority over this investment is immediately suspended, effective right now. Her voice shook with controlled fury. Marcus Voss, I want you to leave this room immediately. Do not return under any circumstances. Voss hesitated, looking to Victor for direction. Victor nodded reluctantly, his entire demeanor having shifted from arrogance to something resembling desperation. Voss retreated, but his eyes never left Marcus. Mr. Chen, Eleanor continued, her voice taking on, I want to offer my most sincere apologies for this absolutely unacceptable treatment. No investor should ever be treated this way. No human being should be treated this way. As Marcus took his seat at the table, Rothstein let out a nervous laugh. Come on, nobody could have predicted. Marcus interrupted him before he could finish. The hallway security footage has already been backed up to my personal servers, along with the audio recordings from the reception area. Rothstein's laughter died in his throat immediately. Through the conference room windows, Marcus could see reporters beginning to gather in the lobby below. News vans were pulling into the parking lot. Someone had already leaked the story to the media. By the next morning, the incident would be national news. Video footage of a billionaire teenager being humiliated by corporate executives would spread across social media platforms within hours. Victor's reputation was about to become absolutely destroyed. Across the table, Rachel Torres caught Marcus's attention. The safety engineer slid a handwritten note toward him. Her hands were trembling. Marcus glanced down at the paper. The words made his blood turn to ice. Your father discovered what this company was hiding. His death was not an accident. Eleanor cleared her throat, attempting to regain control of the situation. The board will now move into private executive session. All non-essential personnel should. I'm staying, Marcus said. He folded Rachel's note carefully, his eyes never leaving hers. Rachel Torres just informed me that my father's death wasn't an accident. I want to know everything. Victor shot to his feet. That's completely inappropriate. This woman has no authority to... Your father was Nathaniel Chen, Rachel said quietly. Her voice carried decades of accumulated guilt and buried conscience. I wondered if you were related when I saw your name this morning. The room grew impossibly tense. You knew him? Marcus asked, his carefully maintained calm facade cracking at the edges. Rachel nodded slowly. Nathaniel designed the core architecture of our collision avoidance system. Every patent that Victor has claimed credit for was built directly on top of your father's foundational work. The real genius in these systems that all came from Nathaniel's engineering. Rachel's voice grew stronger as she spoke, anger replacing fear for the first time in what seemed like years. Victor told the press that Nathaniel was a minor contractor who got fired for missing deadlines. Fired for unstable behavior, he said, always claiming someone was watching him. That's a complete lie, and everyone in this room knows it, Rachel said firmly. Nathaniel discovered something that should never have existed inside our safety systems, something that shouldn't have been created in the first place. Rothstein laughed nervously. "Come on, Rachel, don't get emotional about some contractor. There's no evidence of anything like that." Rachel ignored him completely. Nathaniel found the Dominion Protocol. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Dominion Protocol," Eleanor repeated, her voice carefully controlled. "Explain what that means." Rachel took a deep breath. "It's unauthorized software buried deep inside the safety architecture of our autonomous vehicles. It provides external access and control capabilities. Someone can remotely manipulate steering systems, brake systems, acceleration, everything." Nathaniel discovered it during a routine safety audit. He was going to report it to federal investigators. Victor's face went absolutely white. His hands gripped the edge of the table. "This is ridiculous speculation," Victor said quickly. "The woman is clearly having some kind of emotion. This is inappropriate and unsubstantiated. He died 3 days before his scheduled meeting with the Department of Transportation." Rachel continued, as if Victor hadn't spoken. She turned to face Marcus directly. "Highway Patrol reported that his car simply veered off the road for no apparent mechanical reason, no equipment failure, no medical emergency. The vehicle was completely destroyed in the crash." "What kind of car was he driving?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "An unregistered Veritech test vehicle," Rachel whispered. "One that shouldn't have even existed in the fleet records. A vehicle that ran Dominion Protocol." The conference room erupted into shocked murmurs and crosstalk. Multiple board members began speaking simultaneously, demanding clarification, asking questions, expressing disbelief. Marcus's voice cut through the noise like a knife blade. "My investment wasn't purely financial. I started investigating Veritech 6 months ago when I found fragments of my father's code embedded inside your traffic management patents. His algorithms, his architecture, all claimed as your own intellectual property." He looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "I want immediate access to every piece of company financial records, the safety archives, everything from the last 10 years, every transaction, every development record, every test result." Eleanor nodded without hesitation. "Granted. Victor Rothstein, you're both temporarily removed from operational control pending this investigation." Rothstein's voice cracked with desperation. "You can't do this. We have contracts. We have legal protections. Mr. Chen's investment agreement gives him controlling voting rights during transition periods," Eleanor stated coldly. "His decisions supersede yours." Victor's face twisted with rage and something else, pure humiliation. "This is what happens when you allow people like him into our building. They come in making wild accusations, disrupting legitimate business operations, destroying careers based on conspiracy theories," and Marcus's voice remained steady, but his eyes flashed dangerously. "People like me? Say it clearly, Victor. What exactly do you mean? Specify exactly what you're referring to." Victor's mouth moved silently, his brain finally catching up to the trap he'd walked into. Around the table, board members watched with visible disgust. Within 20 minutes, Marcus sat before 3 computer monitors displaying Veritech's complete financial network. Rachel guided him through the safety databases while Eleanor observed from across the room, silent witness to the unfolding horror of her company's corruption. "Your investment arrived at 9:15 this morning," Rachel said, pointing to the transfer logs. $300 million, exactly as you arranged." Marcus scrolled through the account activity, his expression darkened with each line he read. $180 million was moved at 9:18, he said quietly. 3 minutes after arrival. "Moved where?" Eleanor asked. Marcus traced the digital trail through a labyrinth of shell corporations. Each transfer required encrypted authorization codes, security mechanisms that were theoretically known only to a handful of people, a restricted circle that Marcus had designed himself. Cascaded Holdings, Summit Financial, Desert Valley Investments. He read the names aloud, his voice growing tighter. All registered in different states, all created within the last 6 months. Rachel leaned over his shoulder. "Can you trace who authorized these transfers?" Marcus clicked on the approval signatures. The blood drained from his face. "Each stolen payment bears my own authorization code," he whispered. "My digital signature, my private security key that only I possess and one other person." He verified the digital signature for the 3rd time, his fingers trembling slightly as he worked. The mathematical algorithms were absolutely perfect, flawlessly executed. No hacker could have duplicated this level of encryption without direct access to his private security key. "This is impossible," he said. "What did you find?" Eleanor stepped closer. "Someone used my actual security key to authorize these transfers. The authorization codes are genuine." Marcus's voice was barely audible. "That person would have to be my financial mentor, Roland Vance." Eleanor's face went pale. "Roland Vance? The investment advisor. He's been guiding my portfolio since my father died. He helped me structure this entire Veritech investment. I trusted him completely." Victor leaned forward, with a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Or maybe you staged this whole thing yourself. Transferred your own money into fake accounts, then invented the perfect excuse to seize control of Veritech at a significant discount. Perfect victim narrative. Sympathy from the board, complete operational control, all for the cost of one transfer." "You're insane," Marcus said. "Am I?" Victor's voice grew louder, his confidence returning as he formed this new narrative. Young billionaire plays victim, gains sympathy and support, demonstrates technical genius by allegedly tracking down the conspiracy, takes over a company he's been investigating for months. It's a sophisticated con, if you think about it, very well executed. Eleanor stood abruptly. "That's enough, Victor. No more speaking. You're suspended, effective immediately, pending investigation." But Marcus wasn't listening to the argument between Eleanor and Victor. His fingers were moving across the keyboard, implementing emergency financial locks. He isolated the compromised servers, rerouted security protocols, and activated emergency voting procedures buried deep in the investment agreement. "What are you doing?" Eleanor asked. "Protecting what's left," Marcus said, his voice cold and focused. "I'm assuming direct operational control under Section 12 of the emergency provisions. All financial transfers now require my physical presence and biometric confirmation." Outside the conference room, reporters had begun gathering in the lobby. Camera flashes cut through the morning light as news broke across every platform. A 19-year-old billionaire whose investment had just saved a major corporation had spent 3 hours being humiliated by executives who didn't know who he was. The footage would spread across social media within minutes. Comments, shares, retweets, Victor's arrogant dismissal, the deliberate searches, the humiliating treatment, all captured on camera, all available for public consumption. The public scandal was absolutely complete. Victor's career lay in ruins, but Marcus's victory crumbled in the next breath.
"Marcus," Rachel's voice cracked with panic. She was staring at her own laptop, watching lines of code disappear in real time. "The Dominion protocol files are being deleted. Someone's accessing the safety archives remotely." Marcus spun toward her screen. Critical data was vanishing even as they watched. Vehicle logs, test results, crash analyses, all dissolving into digital nothing. The deletions were happening faster and faster, accelerating as if someone had just activated an automated destruction sequence. "Can you stop it?" Eleanor demanded. "I'm trying, but they have administrator access from somewhere outside this building," Rachel said, typing frantically. "They're moving faster than I can block them." "How much time do we need?" Marcus asked. 20 minutes? 30? Maybe more?" "I'm not sure." Marcus immediately opened his phone and began typing. "Cop everything to isolated storage. Anything you can save, save it. Save everything." Victor stood slowly, smoothing his suit jacket with the kind of deliberate care that suggested he had made a decision. His expression had shifted from rage to something colder, more calculating, more dangerous. "Well, this has been educational," he said. "But I have other appointments to attend to." He walked toward the door, then paused. His phone buzzed with an incoming text message. He read it, and a small smile played across his lips. He typed a quick response and placed the phone back into his pocket. "Meeting over, kids getting too close." Make him understand he should walk away. He hit send and slipped the phone back into his pocket. As Victor left the boardroom, Rachel turned to Marcus. "Where did you store the original evidence? The files about your father's work?" "My car," Rachel said. "Underground parking garage, level B2. I have encrypted drives hidden in the trunk. I've been keeping them for 5 years, waiting for the right moment to use them." "Then that's where we're going," Marcus said. Right now, as the sun began to set behind the downtown skyline, Marcus and Rachel rode the elevator down to the parking garage.
Neither of them noticed the black SUV that had followed them from the building. Neither of them saw Voss reviewing the floor plans on his tablet, positioning his team of security officers between the concrete support pillars where the overhead security cameras couldn't see them. The elevator doors opened with a soft mechanical whisper. Marcus stepped into the dim, echoing space of the underground garage. The air smelled of motor oil and exhaust fumes. His footsteps echoed against the low ceiling as he walked beside Rachel toward her vehicle. "Third row, near the wall," she said, fumbling with her keys. "I parked where the cameras don't have good coverage. That should have been their first warning." Nolan Voss emerged from behind a concrete support beam like a predator stepping into moonlight. His tactical clothing made him nearly invisible in the shadows. Two security officers flanked him, blocking the path to Rachel's car. "Going somewhere?" Voss's voice carried the flat authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Marcus stopped walking. His eyes swept the garage, calculating distances, mapping potential escape routes. 3 men, limited visibility, no immediate witnesses. "We're leaving," Marcus said calmly. "Step aside." Voss smiled without warmth. "You've got something that belongs to the company. Hand over the drives." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do, kid." The officer on Voss's left was younger, maybe 30, with the kind of muscular build that came from serious gym time. Rich boy thinks money buys respect with daddy's bankroll. Except daddy's dead, which makes you wonder how a 19-year-old black kid got all that cash in the first place. Maybe the FBI should look into your business practices. Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the same rage that had burned through him during the boardroom meeting. But rage without control was worthless. He forced his breathing to slow, his muscles to relax. "Rachel," he said quietly, "call building security." She reached for her phone. The younger officer moved faster, slapping the device from her hands. It skittered across the concrete, its screen cracking against a tire. "Oops," the man said. "Guess you'll have to handle this yourself." Voss stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could smell his cologne mixed with coffee breath. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give us those drives. Then you're going to walk away from Veritech and never come back. Rich kids like you have other toys to play with. We're removing a problem for the greater good. And if I refuse," Marcus asked, "then we help you understand that some lessons can't be bought with money." The 3 men spread out, trying to surround him. Marcus backed toward the narrow space between 2 parked cars, a white SUV and a black sedan. The gap was maybe 4 feet wide. Perfect. His father had taught him to fight in their garage, using a heavy bag suspended from the ceiling joists. Distance and timing, Nathaniel had said. "Make them come to you one at a time." The younger officer charged first, throwing a wild right hook. Marcus slipped the punch, stepped inside, and drove his left fist into the man's solar plexus. The officer doubled over, gasping, and stumbled backward into the SUV's door. The older man tried to grab Marcus from behind, reaching around his neck. Marcus caught the man's wrist, twisted sharply, and slammed the arm against the sedan's doorframe. Bone struck metal with a sickening crack. The officer screamed and fell to his knees, clutching his fractured wrist. But Voss had been watching carefully, studying Marcus's movements, understanding his technique. He feinted left, then dove low, tackling Marcus around the waist. They crashed onto the concrete together, Marcus's head bouncing off the rough surface. Stars exploded behind his eyes. Voss rolled on top, pinning Marcus's shoulders. His fist connected with Marcus's ribs, once, twice, 3 times. Each blow drove the air from his lungs. "You think being rich makes you special?" Voss grabbed Marcus's throat with both hands, squeezing until black spots danced at the edges of his vision. "You think money makes you untouchable?" Marcus clawed at Voss's hands, fighting for air. His lungs burned. The garage spun around him. Then car alarms erupted throughout the garage. Rachel stood beside her sedan, frantically pressing key fobs she'd pulled from her purse. The Honda's horn blared. The Toyota's siren wailed. The Mercedes flashed its lights in strobing patterns. "What the hell?" Voss loosened his grip. Footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Voices called out asking what was happening. A flashlight beam swept across the concrete. Voss released Marcus's throat and stood quickly. Blood trickled from Marcus's split lip onto the garage floor. His ribs screamed with each breath. "This isn't over," Voss said. He reached into Rachel's purse, which had fallen during the struggle, and pulled out one of the encrypted storage drives. "Tell anyone about this, and next time there won't be witnesses." The three men disappeared into the shadows as employees began emerging from the stairwell. Marcus pushed himself to his hands and knees, coughing, tasting copper in his mouth. 20 minutes later, paramedics were checking Marcus's pupils with a small flashlight. His lip had swollen and dark bruises were already forming along his ribs. "You should go to the hospital," the female paramedic said. "Possible concussion, definitely some cracked ribs." "I'm fine," Marcus replied. "You were unconscious for—" "I'm fine." He stood slowly, wincing. Rachel understood immediately. They walked toward the elevator together, making sure every security camera saw them. Let the world see what Victor Ashford's security team had done to a 19-year-old investor. As they walked, Marcus wiped blood from his chin with his sleeve. One storage drive was gone, but they still had others. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Part 4. The deception, the fluorescent lights in Marcus's downtown office cast harsh shadows across his swollen face. A woman named Julia Monroe pressed an ice pack against his split lip with steady hands. Her movements were precise and clinical. "Hold still," she said, dabbing antiseptic on the cuts along his jaw. "This is going to sting." Marcus winced, but didn't pull away. The pain helped him focus. On the wall-mounted monitor, security footage from Veritech's parking garage played in slow motion, Voss's fist connecting with Marcus's ribs. The moment his head struck concrete. The way the three men scattered when the car alarms began. "This footage is our insurance policy," Julia said, securing a bandage over the worst cut. "Assault, battery, attempted robbery. Victor just handed us everything we need to destroy him in court." Rachel sat hunched over her laptop at the conference table, fingers flying across the keyboard. "The deletion protocols are still running," she said without looking up. "They're wiping server logs in real time. By morning, there won't be any digital evidence left of Dominion Protocol's existence." Marcus's phone buzzed. Samuel Greer's name appeared on the screen. "A voice transmission request." Marcus accepted the call. "You said it was urgent." Samuel's gravelly voice carried years of cigarettes and disappointment. "I'm downstairs. Give me 10 minutes." Samuel Greer was a former federal investigator who had spent 30 years chasing corruption that powerful people preferred to leave uncovered. He had investigated Marcus's father's death 5 years ago before being mysteriously removed from the case by his superiors. 15 minutes later, Samuel pushed through the office doors carrying a weathered briefcase. At 62, he moved like a man who had spent decades chasing leads that powerful institutions didn't want followed. His gray hair was cropped short military style, and his eyes held the weary intelligence of someone who had seen too much corruption go unpunished. "Marcus Chen," Samuel said, studying the young man's bruised face. "You look just like your father." "You investigated his death," Marcus said. "It wasn't a question. Tried to. The Federal Transportation Safety Board pulled me off the case after 2 weeks." Samuel set his briefcase on the table and clicked it open. "They said it was a clear mechanical failure, not really my jurisdiction." "Move along." He spread dozens of photographs across the conference table. Twisted metal, shattered glass, a vehicle wrapped around a concrete barrier at angles that seemed physically impossible. "Your father's car received external commands 17 seconds before impact," Samuel said, pointing to a close-up of the vehicle's computer module. "Speed increased from 45 miles per hour to 87 miles per hour. Steering locked hard left. Brakes disabled completely." Rachel leaned forward, studying the photographs. "That's Dominion Protocol. It can redirect any connected vehicle without leaving standard diagnostic codes. I tried to tell my supervisors," Samuel said grimly. "They said I was seeing conspiracies where none existed. Forced retirement with a damaged pension as a reward for my trouble." Julia picked up one of the crash scene photos. "This proves external manipulation. Combined with tonight's assault, we have grounds for an emergency preservation order." "How long do we have?" Marcus asked. "Hours, not days." Rachel's fingers never stopped typing. "The deletions are accelerating. They're not just removing evidence, they're rewriting the base code to make it look like the system never existed at all." Marcus stood carefully, his ribs protesting. "Then we divide the work. Rachel, Find the original Dominion source code before they completely scrub it. Samuel, trace those shell companies, follow every transfer, every payment, every connection back to Victor, and beyond. He turned to Julia. We need that preservation order before sunrise, federal judges, emergency motions, whatever it takes. What about you? Julia asked. I'm going to find out how they got my authorization codes. Someone inside my own system betrayed me. I want to know who. Samuel was already spreading financial documents across the table, connecting names and dates with red string like a detective from an old-school movie. This goes deeper than corporate fraud, he said. Your father found something that scared them enough to kill for it. Something serious enough that they'd murder a man to keep it hidden. The office settled into focused silence. Coffee cups multiplied on desks. Phone calls were made to judges and federal contacts. Computer screens glowed with financial records and code fragments. The night stretched on, and the scope of the conspiracy kept expanding. Shortly before midnight, Samuel straightened in his chair.
Found something?
He said quietly. The others gathered around his laptop. On the screen, bank records showed a series of payments from Meridian Holdings, one of the shell companies, to various law firms and insurance agencies. 17 settlements, Samuel said, scrolling through the transactions, all for unexplained vehicle deaths, all paid within the last 3 years, all structured to look like routine insurance payouts. The names scrolled past. Jennifer Martinez, age 29, highway accident. Robert Kim, age 43, single car crash. Angela Foster, age 36, mechanical failure. The list went on. 17 families who lost someone, Marcus said. 17 people who died in accidents that weren't really accidents. Nathaniel wasn't the first victim, Rachel said, her voice barely a whisper. He was just the first one smart enough to figure out what was happening. Evelyn's face had gone pale. How many more victims don't we know about? How many deaths did they hide before they started paying settlements? The weight of it settled over the room like smoke. This wasn't about corporate greed or stolen patents. It was about a conspiracy that had turned autonomous vehicles into weapons, then covered its tracks with money and silence. Samuel closed the laptop slowly. Now we know what we're really fighting against. The clock's red numbers burned past midnight as evidence of systematic murder spread across their screens. Samuel connected financial records to death certificates, while Rachel cross-referenced accident reports with Dominion Protocol access logs. Each discovery made the conspiracy more horrifying and more complete. Jennifer Martinez was an environmental lawyer who had been investigating toxic waste dumping by one of Meridian Holdings' subsidiary companies. She died in a single car accident on Highway 101, supposedly due to brake failure. Samuel tapped his screen. 2 days before she died, someone accessed Dominion Protocol using authorization code 77 Alpha. The system shows her vehicle's brake assistance was remotely disabled at exactly 11:47 p.m. Marcus stared at the timestamps. Cold precision, no emotion, no hesitation. They turned our safety system into an execution method, he said. Robert Kim was a city councilman in Phoenix who had been blocking a casino development worth $400 million. He crashed into a concrete barrier on the interstate. The police report said he fell asleep at the wheel. Dominion logs show his steering was overridden for 18 seconds. Rachel said quietly, just long enough to aim him at that barrier. The pattern emerged like a disease spreading through data. 17 victims. 17 people who had threatened someone's profits or exposed someone's crimes. 17 families told their loved ones died in tragic accidents. Angela Foster was investigating insurance fraud. She had identified a network of fake claims worth $60 million. Her car went off a bridge during what police called a mechanical malfunction. Your father built collision avoidance technology, Marcus said, his hands clenching into fists. He spent years perfecting algorithms that could predict and prevent accidents 3 seconds before they happened. They perverted everything he worked for. The stolen money traces back to 12 different shell companies, Samuel said, highlighting bank transfers on his screen. But they all eventually lead back to Meridian Holdings, and Meridian's primary investor is, he paused, looking uncomfortable. Who? Marcus demanded. Vance Capital Management. The name hit like a physical blow. Roland Vance, the man who had guided Marcus through his father's funeral. The man who had helped him invest his first $1 billion. The man who had become the closest thing to a father figure, Marcus had left after Nathaniel's death. "That's impossible," Marcus said. "Roland has been helping me since my father died. He raised the investment capital for Navigat AI. He's the one who taught me how to protect my assets from corporate raiders." Julia's voice was gentle but firm. "Marcus, the evidence doesn't lie. 180 million of your money went through Vance Capital's accounts before disappearing into those shell companies. The financial records are absolutely clear." "Roland wouldn't," Marcus started, then stopped. The financial records were undeniable. Transfer authorizations bearing his digital signature. Routing numbers that matched Vance Capital's primary accounts. "Maybe there's an explanation," Marcus said weakly. "Someone could have hacked his system, used his accounts without permission." Samuel shook his head. These transfers required biometric confirmation. Fingerprint and retinal scans. Roland approved every single transaction personally. The betrayal felt worse than the beating in the parking garage. Physical violence was honest. This was something deeper. Trust weaponized against him. Roland had held Marcus while he cried at Nathaniel's funeral. He had celebrated when Navigat AI went public. He had been there for every milestone, every decision, every moment when Marcus needed guidance. "I need to hear it from him," Marcus said finally. "That's dangerous," Julia warned. "If he's involved, confronting him directly could put all of us at risk." Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed Roland's private number. The call connected after 2 rings. "Marcus," Roland's voice carried its usual warmth. "It's rather late for business calls, isn't it? The situation at Veritech is getting complicated," Marcus said carefully. "Victor and his people are making serious accusations. They're claiming I authorized financial transactions I never approved." "Corporate desperation," Roland replied smoothly. "Victor is scrambling to shift blame before the board removes him completely. Don't let his panic distract you from your real objectives." "Someone transferred 180 million without my knowledge," Marcus said. "I'm aware of the discrepancy. My team has been tracing the unauthorized access. We'll recover every dollar. I promise you that." Marcus felt a flicker of relief. Maybe there was an innocent explanation after all. "The best course now is strategic withdrawal," Roland continued. "Let me handle the financial recovery while you distance yourself from Veritech completely. Victor's people are dangerous when cornered. You think I should abandon the investigation. I think you should trust the adults who care about your future." Roland's tone remained patient, almost paternal. "Your father's death was tragic, but pursuing conspiracy theories won't bring him back. It will only destroy everything you've built." Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. Something in Roland's voice had shifted. Too controlled, too rehearsed. "Where are you calling from?" Marcus asked suddenly. "My home office." "Why?" But Marcus was already pulling the call's audio data through his phone's analysis software, isolating background frequencies and ambient sound patterns. The others watched as he connected his device to the computer and ran the audio through several filters. A low mechanical hum became audible beneath Roland's words. Then the distinctive whine of server cooling fans running at high capacity. Marcus's blood turned cold. He recognized that specific frequency pattern. He'd heard it during his tour of Veritech's headquarters. The sound signature of the company's private server room. Roland wasn't calling from his home office. He was inside Veritech's supposedly locked headquarters, standing next to the very computers that contained Dominion protocol. The sunrise painted Veritech's glass towers in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Julia held up the Federal Preservation Order. The document carried the weight of Judge Morrison's emergency signature, issued at 5 in the morning after she reviewed the evidence Marcus's team had compiled through the night. Every server, every backup drive, every piece of digital storage in this building is now under federal protection, Julia announced to the security guards blocking the entrance. Anyone who interferes faces obstruction charges. Behind her stood 3 federal financial agents. Their badges gleamed in the early light. Eleanor Harmon walked beside them, her face grim with the weight of discovering how thoroughly Victor had corrupted the company she'd helped govern for 15 years. Victor met them in the lobby, his usual arrogance replaced by desperate calculation. "This is corporate harassment. My attorneys will have this overturned within hours. Your attorneys can't override a federal preservation order." Agent Martinez replied coldly. "Step aside, please." The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like ascending toward judgment. Marcus watched the floor numbers climb, remembering his first visit when security had treated him like an unwelcome stranger. Now he returned with the full authority of federal law behind him. Rachel's hands shook as she accessed the protected servers. They tried to wipe the Dominion logs, but fragments remain in the backup cache. She whispered to Marcus. Look at this timestamp sequence. The data painted a horrifying picture. 17 separate incidents over 4 years. Each crash preceded by Dominion activation codes, each victim's vehicle remotely overridden in the final moments before impact. Nathaniel's crash appeared in the logs as Field Test 7, subject unaware of system engagement. Samuel cross-referenced the financial records with Shell Corporation databases. Every payment traced back to the same offshore network. Roland Vance Financial managed the primary accounts. Marcus's chest tightened, but he pushed the implications away. Evidence first, emotions later. Eleanor called the emergency shareholder hearing for 2:00 p.m. This board will vote on Victor's removal within the hour, she declared. The shareholders deserve to know how their investment was weaponized. The boardroom filled quickly. Shareholders, journalists, federal observers, everyone packed into the available space. Marcus stood at the head of the table where Victor had once humiliated him, now holding documents that would destroy the man's career forever. Veritech's collision avoidance system contains hidden override capabilities. Marcus began, this technology, called Dominion Protocol, has been used to cause at least 17 fatal crashes. The victims include my father, Nathaniel Chen, whose name was erased from the patents he helped create. Victor's face had turned ashen. Preston sat beside him, sweat beading on his forehead. The evidence shows systematic murder disguised as automotive accidents, Marcus continued. Federal investigators have traced payments totaling $47 million to executives who sold access to this killing system. The board voted unanimously. Victor was removed as CEO effective immediately. Preston was suspended pending criminal investigation. Employees gathering outside the conference room burst into applause when Marcus announced that Nathaniel's name would be restored to every patent he had contributed to. Federal agents moved through the lobby like avenging angels. Victor watched them approach, his shoulders sagging in defeat. The man who had made Marcus wait in humiliation for 3 hours now faced handcuffs and federal charges. Marcus felt the satisfaction of methodical justice served. His investigation had succeeded without requiring violence or revenge. The truth had been enough. Then the elevator doors opened. Roland Vance stepped into the lobby carrying a leather portfolio thick with documents. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his expression concerned but determined. He moved with the confident authority of someone delivering crucial evidence rather than fleeing prosecution. Agent Martinez, Roland called out. I'm Roland Vance, financial advisor to Marcus Chen. I need to provide critical information about this investigation. Marcus's blood chilled. Roland wasn't supposed to be here. Marcus had specifically told his mentor to stay away from Veritech until the federal case concluded. Roland opened his portfolio and handed documents to the lead agent. I discovered evidence that my client has been using his Navigate AI traffic system to control Dominion Protocol remotely. I believe his grief over his father's death led him to orchestrate these crashes himself. The lobby fell silent. Reporters turned their cameras toward Marcus. Board members stared in shock. This is fabricated, Marcus said, but his voice sounded weak even to himself. I tried to guide him away from this path, Roland said sadly, but his obsession with avenging Nathaniel consumed him. I can no longer protect a client who uses his technology to commit murder. The federal agent stepped away from Victor and moved toward Marcus instead. Marcus Chen, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and financial fraud. The handcuffs closed around his wrists before the employees who had just applauded his victory. Cameras flashed as agents announced his assets would be seized immediately. Victor watched from across the lobby, no longer defeated, but smiling with cruel satisfaction. The federal interview room felt like a concrete tomb. Marcus sat across from Agent Martinez while the overhead light buzzed like an angry wasp. His wrists ached from the handcuffs they'd finally removed after 3 hours of questioning. The evidence is overwhelming, Martinez said, sliding documents across the metal table. Your authorization codes are embedded throughout Dominion protocol. Your Navigati timestamps match 17 fatal crashes perfectly. Marcus studied the papers with growing horror. His genuine security keys stared back at him. His actual digital signatures appeared on fund transfers he'd never authorized. The dates and times were accurate down to the second. I didn't create these. Someone with your exact access credentials did. The door opened and Julia Rowe entered like a force of nature. Her briefcase hit the table with authority that made Martinez lean back in his chair. Agent Martinez, I'm Julia Rowe, Mr. Chen's attorney. This arrest is based on fabricated evidence, and I can prove it. Ms. Rowe, the forensic analysis is conclusive. No, it's not. Julia opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. These documents show that the files used in your warrant were uploaded to Veritech servers after your team had already sealed them for evidence preservation. Someone violated a federal court order to plant this evidence. Martinez frowned. That's impossible. The servers have been under continuous federal supervision. Check the metadata yourself. Julia said coldly. Files bearing today's timestamp appear in directories that were locked down yesterday morning. Either your agents are incompetent or someone with administrative access committed a federal crime to frame my client. While Julia dismantled the prosecution's case, Roland Vance sat across from Victor Whitlock in a private room at an exclusive club. Victor's shoulder was bandaged from where a federal agent had tackled him during the initial arrest. His eyes burned with rage and humiliation. This wasn't the plan, Victor snarled. You said I'd be protected. Roland poured himself scotch with steady hands. You were never my partner, Victor. You were my public face, a loud, arrogant fool who could draw attention while I operated in the shadows. Victor's face went pale. What are you talking about? I financed your takeover of Veritech 15 years ago. I helped you steal Nathaniel's patents and claim credit for his work. When Nathaniel threatened to expose Dominion Protocol, I arranged his accident. Roland's voice carried no emotion. I eliminated a problem just as I'm eliminating you now. Victor tried to stand, but Roland's security detail appeared at his shoulders. Large men with cold eyes and expensive suits. The federal case against Marcus will collapse within hours. Roland continued, but I need the original test vehicle's black box destroyed before anyone finds it. Rachel Torres knows where it's hidden. We're going to encourage her to silence herself. Permanently. Back in the interview room, Julia had Agent Martinez backed into a corner. Her evidence was undeniable. The warrant relied on files that couldn't have existed when it was signed. Release my client immediately, she demanded. Or explain to a federal judge why your agents violated a court order to fabricate evidence. Martinez spoke quietly into his radio. Minutes later, the door opened and another agent nodded. Mr. Chen, you're free to go, but don't leave the city. Marcus walked out of the federal building at 11:47 p.m. The night air tasted like freedom, but his relief lasted only until Julia's phone buzzed. It's Samuel, she said, answering immediately. Rachel never arrived at the safe house. Her car was found abandoned on Highway 15. They're saying it looks like an accident, but they drove through empty streets toward the location Samuel provided. Rachel's silver sedan sat on the shoulder with its driver door hanging open. The interior light illuminated blood on the steering wheel. Marcus's hands shook as he searched the vehicle. A piece of paper was wedged under the passenger's seat. His name was written in shaky handwriting across the top. The message was brief but terrifying. Desert Testing Facility. Come alone. You have until dawn. Danica grabbed his arm. This is a trap, before Marcus could respond. His phone buzzed with an incoming video call from an unknown number. He answered, and Roland Vance's face appeared on the screen. The camera pulled back to show Rachel Shaw bound to a chair in what looked like an enormous hangar. Her face was bruised and her eyes were filled with terror. Hello, Marcus, Roland said calmly. I believe you found my invitation. Rachel is quite comfortable, as you can see. She'll remain that way as long as you bring every copy of Nathaniel's evidence to the desert facility before sunrise. Come alone. Bring no weapons, no backup, and no recording devices. If I detect any deception, Rachel will join your father in whatever afterlife awaits failed engineers. The call ended, leaving Marcus staring at his reflection in the darkened screen. They drove through downtown Denver in Samuel's unmarked sedan, the federal building's lights fading behind them. Marcus sat in the back seat, his wrists still bearing red marks from the handcuffs. The taste of injustice burned in his throat. "The warehouse is 15 minutes away," Samuel said, checking his mirrors. "We can plan Rachel's rescue there without worrying about surveillance." Julia navigated through sparse late-night traffic. "Roland won't expect us to move this quickly. He thinks you're still locked up." Marcus opened his laptop and began connecting to Navigate AI. "He's been watching us for months. He knows exactly. The traffic light ahead turned red without warning. Then the next one, and the next." "That's not normal," Julia muttered, slowing the car. Marcus's fingers flew across his keyboard. Every signal between here and the warehouse just switched to red. Someone's controlling the traffic grid. A black Veritech sedan pulled into their lane from a side street. Its windows were dark. No driver was visible behind the wheel. "Autonomous vehicle," Samuel said grimly. Using Dominion protocol, 2 more driverless cars emerged from parking lots on either side of the street. They moved with mechanical precision, forming a loose triangle around Samuel's sedan. Their headlights cut through the darkness like predators' eyes. A delivery truck lurched from an alley directly into their path. "Hold on." Julia yanked the wheel left, tires screaming against asphalt. The truck's bumper missed their front end by inches. She accelerated down a narrow side street while the autonomous vehicles adjusted course to follow. Marcus's laptop screen filled with traffic data from across the city. "I'm connecting to the municipal grid. If Roland can control these vehicles, I can predict where they're going." "Can you stop them?" Samuel asked, wincing as another driverless car slammed into their rear bumper. "No, but I can see their routes before they execute them." Marcus's eyes moved rapidly across scrolling code. "Turn right at the next intersection, now." Julia spun the wheel. Behind them, the 3 pursuing vehicles had already begun turning before she completed the maneuver. "They knew we'd go right," she said, her voice tight with fear. "Because Roland's system calculated it," Marcus replied. "But Navigate AI processes traffic patterns faster than Dominion protocol updates. I can see their next moves 3 seconds before they happen." The lead sedan accelerated toward their left side. Marcus watched its projected path appear on his screen. "Sharp left into that construction zone," he commanded. "Trust me." Julia swerved between orange barriers onto a torn-up street. The sedan shot past them, unable to course-correct quickly enough. Construction equipment forced the narrow road into a single lane barely wide enough for their car. "Dead end ahead," Samuel warned. Marcus's screen showed him the answer. "Underground tunnel loading dock entrance on the right. Go." They plunged down a concrete ramp into darkness. Behind them, the autonomous vehicles couldn't follow. Their programming wouldn't allow entry into unauthorized areas. But Roland's system was learning, adapting, evolving. He watched from his remote location, rerouting the vehicles through alternate routes. "He's repositioning them," Marcus said, watching new paths appear on his display. "They'll intercept us when we exit." The tunnel stretched beneath downtown Denver's business district. Fluorescent lights created harsh pools of illumination between long stretches of shadow. Their engine noise echoed off concrete walls. "How many exits?" Julia asked. Marcus studied building schematics overlaid on his traffic map. 4, but they'll have vehicles waiting at 3 of them within 90 seconds. The 4th service road behind the federal courthouse leads to a gated loading yard. "Can we make it before they reposition?" Samuel checked his watch. Their car shuddered as something struck the roof. A piece of concrete crashed onto their windshield, spiderwebbing the glass. "They're dropping debris from storm drains," Marcus realized. "Roland's accessing the city's infrastructure grid." More chunks of concrete tumbled from overhead openings. Julia accelerated through the obstacle course, dodging falling debris while following Marcus's navigation commands. "Exit ramp ahead," he announced. "Gun it straight up." They burst from underground into the pre-dawn darkness. 2 Veritech vehicles were already waiting in the street, positioned to block their escape routes, but Marcus had anticipated this move perfectly. "Hard right through that alley," Marcus commanded. The narrow passage led to a loading dock behind the courthouse. As the 2 sedans entered the alley, Marcus remotely activated the steel security gate. It slammed shut behind them with a metallic crash that echoed through the urban canyon. "They're locked in." Samuel said with satisfaction. Julia drove through empty streets toward the warehouse. Samuel pressed a bloodied hand to his shoulder where debris had struck him during the tunnel chase. 20 minutes later, they reached Samuel's secure warehouse. Inside, Marcus spread blueprints of the desert testing facility across a metal table. The compound covered 12 acres of Nevada wasteland, surrounded by double fencing and motion sensors. "Rachel's being held in the main hangar," he said, pointing to the largest structure. "But rescuing her isn't enough. Roland will disappear the moment we extract her. He'll resurface somewhere else with new identities and cleaner operations." Julia studied the facility layout. "What are you suggesting?" Marcus met her eyes. "We expose him publicly while we're inside the compound, force him to confess on camera where he can't control the transmission. Make it so the entire world sees what he's done." The warehouse smelled of motor oil and old metal. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Marcus spread digital blueprints across the workbench. His laptop displayed live satellite feeds of the desert facility 60 miles southeast of Las Vegas. 24 cameras, he said, marking positions on the printout. Motion sensors every 50 feet along both fence lines, 3 automated gates with biometric scanners. Julia leaned over his shoulder. "How do we get past all that? We don't go through it, we go under it." Marcus highlighted a thin line running beneath the compound's eastern perimeter. "Maintenance tunnel. My father documented it years ago when Veritech first built the facility. It connects to the main hangar's subbasement level. The tunnel was designed for fiber optic cables, but it's wide enough for a person to crawl through." He traced the route with his finger. 30-yard crawl comes up inside the building where cameras can't see it. Julia opened her laptop and began typing rapidly. "I'm establishing multiple transmission points. Live feed goes to Channel 7 News, the Denver Post, every major automotive blog, plus direct links to shareholders and victims' families." "Can Roland shut it down?" Samuel asked. "Not all of them simultaneously. I'm using redundant servers across 4 states. The moment we activate recording, everything gets broadcast in real time. No delays, no editing, no corporate filters." Marcus pulled up the facility's vehicle control network. Dozens of test cars sat in organized rows throughout the compound. "Voss will have 6 guards minimum, maybe 8. I can use the autonomous vehicles to divide them." "You mean run them down?" Samuel's voice carried concern. "No. I'll redirect the cars to create barriers, block sight lines, force the guards into separate areas. I won't kill them, but I will isolate them." Samuel stood slowly, testing his injured arm. "I'm coming with you. Your shoulder will heal." "This won't," Samuel gestured at the blueprints. "I should have stopped this conspiracy 5 years ago. Nathaniel died because I failed. I'm not failing again." Julia looked up from her screen. "Federal support. Agent Martinez will position tactical teams 2 miles out. They can't approach until we confirm Rachel's exact location. Legal complications if they breach private property without concrete proof she's being held. Proof we'll provide," Marcus said grimly. He opened Nathaniel's archived code files, searching through thousands of lines of programming. His father had been meticulous, documenting every system component hidden within the collision avoidance protocols. Marcus found something unexpected. "There's a master override," he said quietly. Dad embedded a dormant command in the original Dominion software. Julia moved beside him. "What kind of command?" "Emergency stop. If activated, it freezes every vehicle running Dominion protocol. Completely immobilizes them, all of them." "Every car?" Samuel asked. "Every single one. Every vehicle in their network." Marcus's voice carried wonder and grief. "Dad built it as a safeguard in case the system was compromised. He knew this might happen. He prepared for it." Samuel checked his weapon and secured it beneath his jacket. "Smart man, just like his son." Julia finished her transmission setup and closed her laptop. "Broadcasting equipment is ready. Portable camera with satellite uplink. Once we're inside, the whole world watches." Marcus gathered the blueprints and powered down his systems. The warehouse fell quiet except for the distant hum of highway traffic. Dawn was still 3 hours away, but the horizon showed the faintest hint of gray. "Roland won't expect us to come straight at him," Marcus said. "He thinks he's won. Victor believes I'm finished. They're celebrating while Rachel suffers." He shouldered his equipment bag and walked toward the exit. Samuel and Julia followed their footsteps, echoing in the empty space. Outside, an unmarked utility van waited in the parking lot. Samuel had acquired it from a federal motor pool. Completely clean, no tracking devices, registration that wouldn't raise flags if stopped. 2 hours to the facility, Samuel said, settling into the driver's seat. We'll arrive just as the sun comes up. Marcus climbed into the passenger seat, his laptop balanced on his knees. The desert highway stretched ahead, empty except for long-haul truckers and early commuters. At 3:15 in the morning, they pulled onto Interstate 25 and began driving south. The warehouse disappeared behind them as they entered the darkness between cities. The pale light of dawn crept across the desert horizon as Samuel guided the van behind a jagged ridge of red sandstone. Below them, Veritech's testing facility sprawled across the valley floor like a mechanical infection on the pristine landscape. Marcus pressed binoculars to his eyes, studying the compound. 6 buildings, main hangar in the center, control tower on the east side. Guard rotations every 20 minutes, Samuel observed, checking his watch. 2 men at the main gate, 1 patrol vehicle circling the perimeter. Julia adjusted her satellite uplink and tested the camera feed. Broadcasting equipment is live. Everything we record goes straight to federal servers and 3 news networks. Samuel handed Marcus a radio earpiece. I'll stay here and guide Agent Martinez's team when they arrive. Keep this channel open. Marcus shouldered his equipment bag and started down the rocky slope toward the maintenance tunnel entrance. Julia followed, her camera recording their approach. The tunnel opening was concealed behind a concrete drainage pipe, exactly as the blueprints indicated. Inside, emergency lighting cast red shadows along the narrow passage. Marcus opened his laptop and connected to Veritech's internal network through a maintenance port. Security camera feeds appeared on his screen. Dozens of angles showing empty corridors and testing bays. Disabling cameras in sequence, he whispered into his microphone, making it look like routine system glitches. He typed rapidly, causing cameras to shut down in timed intervals across different sections of the facility. To security monitors, it would appear as random technical failures rather than a coordinated attack. They emerged into a service corridor lined with pipes and electrical conduits. Marcus checked his tablet, following the facility map toward the control tower. Their footsteps echoed softly on polished concrete floors. The control room door stood slightly open. Through the gap, Marcus saw Rachel tied to a metal chair, her face bruised but alert. She looked up as they entered, relief flooding her features. "Thank God," she breathed. Julia rushed to untie the restraints while Marcus kept watch at the door. Heavy footsteps echoed from the main corridor. Voss's guards approaching fast. "They know we're here," Marcus said grimly. He pulled out his phone and accessed Veritech's test vehicle system. Across the facility, dozens of autonomous cars powered up simultaneously. He directed them through the corridors, creating moving barriers between his team and the approaching guards. "This way," he told Julia and Rachel, leading them toward a service bay. 2 guards rounded the corner ahead, raising their weapons. Marcus shoved Rachel and Julia behind a support beam as gunfire erupted. Sparks flew from metal surfaces around them. The narrow service bay became a battlefield. Marcus used the confined space to his advantage, grabbing a heavy wrench from a tool rack and swinging it against the first guard's knee. The man collapsed with a scream. The second guard lunged forward with a tactical baton. Marcus ducked under the swing and drove his shoulder into the man's ribs, slamming him against a service door. His own bruised ribs sent fire through his chest, but he ignored the pain. The guard swung the baton again. Marcus caught his wrist and twisted, using a door frame as leverage to force the weapon from his grip. He followed with a controlled strike to the man's solar plexus, dropping him to the floor. "Marcus," Julia's voice carried relief and fear. "Victor's here. He's trying to escape with documents." Victor Whitlock stumbled into the service bay, blood seeping through his expensive shirt. His face was pale with terror and desperation. "I'll testify against Roland," he gasped. "Give you everything you need. The black box is hidden in the crack of a gunshot," echoed through the facility. Victor screamed and collapsed, clutching his shoulder as blood spread across the concrete floor. Roland Vance stepped into view, holding a smoking pistol. His refined appearance had completely fallen away, replaced by cold calculation and barely controlled rage. "Nobody is testifying against anyone," Roland said calmly. Emergency klaxons began blaring throughout the complex. Heavy steel doors slammed shut across corridors, sealing off exit routes with metallic thunder. Roland's voice echoed from speakers mounted on the walls, amplified through the facility's intercom system. "Mr. Chen, Ms. Monroe, Miss Torres, and our wounded Mr. Whitlock, you have trespassed on private property and compromised sensitive technology. Unfortunately, you will not survive to face trial." The intercom crackled with static before continuing. "In approximately 10 minutes, you will experience a tragic autonomous vehicle malfunction. Multiple test cars will suffer simultaneous brake failures, resulting in a catastrophic collision that destroys this entire section of the facility. Federal investigators will find your remains and conclude that you died attempting to steal proprietary software." Victor moaned and tried to crawl toward cover, leaving a trail of blood behind him. "Your deaths will be ruled accidental." Roland's voice continued through the speakers. Just like Nathaniel's, the facility's main hangar erupted into mechanical chaos as dozens of test vehicles roared to life simultaneously. Engines screamed across the vast concrete floor, while autonomous cars accelerated along elevated tracks that crisscrossed the enormous space like a deadly maze. Marcus felt the building vibrate beneath his feet as the automated systems engaged. Red warning lights bathed everything in an ominous glow, casting moving shadows between the racing vehicles above. Julia pointed toward a console near the far wall where their transmission gear sat dark and silent. "We need to get to that console. It's the only way to broadcast Roland's confession." Preston Hale emerged from behind a support column, his face twisted with rage and desperation. He charged directly at Julia, swinging a heavy metal wrench at her head. Julia ducked and rolled behind a workstation, but Preston followed relentlessly. He smashed the wrench against computer monitors, sending sparks cascading across the floor. "You destroyed everything," Preston screamed. 30 years with this company. You ruined it all for some dead engineer and his worthless kid." Meanwhile, Nolan Voss stepped onto one of the moving test platforms that carried vehicles through safety simulations. The mechanical system moved slowly but steadily, creating a shifting battlefield of metal and machinery. "Time to finish what we started in the parking garage." Voss called to Marcus over the roar of engines. Marcus climbed onto an adjacent platform, keeping his distance as they moved parallel through the hangar. Voss was larger and stronger, but the narrow moving surface limited his ability to use brute force. Voss lunged across the gap between platforms. His fist caught Marcus in the ribs, sending him stumbling backward against a test vehicle's hood. The impact drove the air from his lungs and sent pain shooting through his already bruised torso. Before Marcus could recover, Voss grabbed his jacket and hurled him sideways. Marcus crashed through a glass partition, landing hard among scattered safety equipment and shattered glass. Blood ran from cuts on his face and arms as he struggled to stand. Voss dropped down through the broken glass, his boots crunching on the debris. "Should have stayed in school, kid." But Marcus had been watching carefully. Every time Voss prepared to strike, his right shoulder dropped slightly first. The movement was subtle but consistent, a tell that revealed his intentions a split second before each attack. Voss's shoulder dipped. Marcus didn't try to dodge this time. Instead, he stepped forward into the punch, absorbing the blow against his left arm while grabbing Voss's wrist with both hands. Using Voss's own momentum against him, Marcus pivoted and pulled, sending the larger man tumbling onto another moving platform. The automated safety system immediately detected a person in the test zone and deployed restraining barriers around Voss, trapping him as the platform continued its slow circuit. Julia had flanked Preston while he focused on attacking her. She struck him across the back of the head with a heavy tablet computer, dropping him to his knees. Julia immediately restrained his arms and shoved him away from the console. "Get the transmission running," Marcus shouted as he jumped down from the platform. Julia's fingers flew across the controls, reactivating their live broadcast system. Red lights flickered to green as the signal went live, streaming directly to federal authorities, news networks, and the public. Roland's voice echoed from the central control room above the hangar floor. "You're too late. The evidence dies with you." Through the reinforced glass windows, Marcus could see Roland holding the original black box, the device that contained proof of Nathaniel's murder, and every victim who followed. Roland's hands moved across a master control panel. Every test vehicle in the facility suddenly changed direction, converging on the center of the hangar where Marcus's group stood. The automated cars accelerated to maximum speed, their collision course designed to create a catastrophic impact that would obliterate everything in the target zone. Marcus sprinted toward the central staircase leading to Roland's control room. The building shook as dozens of vehicles thundered along their tracks, all heading directly toward the same devastating point of impact. He reached the control console just as the first wave of vehicles approached the convergence point. His fingers found the hidden access panel his father had described in his notes, a safeguard built into the original code that only Nathaniel knew about. Marcus entered the sequence, his father's birthday, his mother's maiden name, the coordinates of their family home. The system accepted the override. Every vehicle in the facility stopped instantly, their brakes engaging with mechanical precision. The lead cars halted mere inches from colliding, their bumpers almost touching as they formed a perfect circle around the hangar's center. The sudden silence felt deafening after the roar of engines. On the live broadcast feed, Roland's recorded confession began playing automatically, his admission of ordering Nathaniel's death, the details of Dominion Protocol's victims, the complete financial trail of the conspiracy. Banking records scrolled across screens while crash data revealed the true scope of the murder scheme. Heavy boots thundered through the facility as federal agents stormed the hangar from multiple entrances. Their tactical gear and weapons were drawn as they spread through the space, securing every exit. Roland burst from the control room, clutching the black box against his chest as he tried to reach a service door. But Marcus positioned himself directly in the path, blocking the escape route. "It's over, Roland," Marcus said quietly. Roland's refined mask had completely fallen away, replaced by the face of a cornered predator. "You have no idea what you've destroyed, boy. What you've cost me?" "I know exactly what I've cost you," Marcus replied. "Justice for my father, for 17 innocent people, for everyone you betrayed." Federal agents surrounded them with weapons trained on Roland. He looked at the black box in his hands, then at Marcus, then at the agents closing in from all sides. His shoulders sagged in defeat as he let the device fall from his fingers. Marcus caught it before it hit the concrete floor. Roland Vance, the lead agent, announced, "You're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, and terrorism." The handcuffs clicked shut around Roland's wrists as agents read him his rights. His eyes never left Marcus's face, filled with hatred and disbelief that a 19-year-old had dismantled his entire empire. Ambulance lights painted the desert facility in flashing red and blue as paramedics loaded Preston onto a stretcher. His arm hung at an unnatural angle, and dark bruises covered his face where Marcus's precise strikes had connected. He groaned with each movement but remained conscious enough to glare at the agents preparing his arrest paperwork. Victor sat against an ambulance bumper while a medic cleaned the bullet wound in his shoulder. Blood had soaked through his expensive shirt, turning the white fabric crimson. Despite the pain etched across his face, his eyes held a calculating look as federal agents approached with handcuffs. "I want to make a deal," Victor said before they could speak. "I'll testify against Roland, tell you everything about Dominion Protocol." The lead agent studied him coldly. "Your cooperation might help with sentencing, Mr. Whitlock, but it won't prevent charges for conspiracy, fraud, assault, and 17 counts of murder." Victor's face went pale as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Voss required no medical attention, but 4 agents surrounded him as they led him to the transport vehicle. His military training had failed him against Marcus's calculated intelligence, and now he walked in silence with the mechanical precision of a defeated soldier. Roland emerged last, flanked by federal marshals. His silver hair remained perfectly styled despite everything, but his eyes held the hollow look of a man who had lost more than money or freedom. "Roland Vance," the marshal announced formally, "you are under arrest for murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit terrorism, securities fraud, and racketeering." As they loaded the 4 men into separate vehicles, Marcus watched from beside Samuel and Julia. The black box containing his father's final evidence rested securely in Samuel's hands.
"It's really over,"
Julia whispered, standing nearby with tears streaming down her face. "Nathaniel can finally rest." The convoy of federal vehicles disappeared into the desert distance, carrying away the men who had turned cutting-edge safety technology into a murder weapon. Behind them, The testing facility stood silent and empty, its automated systems finally shut down for good. Within hours, news outlets across the country began reporting the arrests. Rowland's vast financial network crumbled as federal agents seized accounts, froze assets, and traced money through dozens of shell corporations. The man who had controlled billions found himself with nothing but a prison cell, and the knowledge that a 19-year-old had outsmarted him completely. Victor's detailed confession, delivered from his hospital bed, provided investigators with a complete roadmap of the entire conspiracy. He named corrupt board members, identified offshore accounts, and revealed the location of additional evidence Rowland had hidden. His cooperation earned him a reduced sentence, but not redemption. The families of 17 victims would never forgive the men who had profited from their loss. Nathaniel Chen's name was officially restored to every patent he had created. Universities established the Nathaniel Chen Memorial Fellowship in Engineering Ethics. His work became required reading in autonomous vehicle development courses worldwide. Marcus Chen stood at the front of Veritech's transformed headquarters exactly 1 year later. The company had been completely restructured. Eleanor Harmon remained as board chair, and Marcus had hired entirely new leadership focused on safety and ethical technology development. Today marks the official establishment of the Dominion Protocol Prevention Initiative, Marcus announced to assembled media and industry leaders. This program will ensure that autonomous vehicle technology develops with proper safeguards and oversight. We're committing $200 million to independent safety research and development. The applause was genuine. Marcus had transformed a conspiracy of corruption into an opportunity for systemic change. Behind the scenes, Navigate AI had been completely rewritten, with Marcus personally overseeing the removal of any code that could remotely manipulate vehicles. The system now existed purely to predict traffic patterns and optimize navigation, nothing more, nothing less. Rachel Torres was promoted to Chief Safety Officer with complete authority to audit every line of code in Veritech's systems. She had become the conscience of the company. On a quiet evening 6 months after the resolution of the case, Marcus sat in his office and opened his father's archived journals. Nathaniel had written extensively about his fears, his suspicions, his growing certainty that something was deeply wrong with the Dominion Protocol. One entry stood out: "If something happens to me, if I'm not here to stop this, I want my son to know the truth. I built a safeguard into the system, an emergency override that only I understand. I pray he never needs to use it. But if he does, I want him to know that I loved him, and I'm sorry I couldn't protect myself better. Marcus, if you're reading this, please finish what I started. Don't let them win." Marcus closed the journal and placed his hand over his heart. His father's work lived on not as a weapon, but as a lesson about the dangers of unchecked power and unethical technology. Every engineer studying autonomous vehicle development would learn Nathaniel Chen's story. Every company developing AI would understand the costs of putting profit before safety. The 17 victims of Dominion Protocol were remembered not as statistics, but as individuals whose deaths mattered. Scholarship funds were established in their names. Their families were compensated not with money they could never accept as adequate, but with the knowledge that their loved ones' deaths had sparked a revolution in industry safety standards. To stand for what's right, even at great cost. In your own life, you may face moments where you're overlooked, dismissed, or treated unfairly because of who you are or what you look like. In those moments, remember Marcus. Remember that your age doesn't determine your capability. Your appearance doesn't determine your value. Your background doesn't determine your destiny. The power to change the world often belongs to those who have been told they have no power at all. Use it wisely. Justice delayed is justice denied, but justice pursued by a determined young person is justice that transforms not just individuals, but entire systems. Marcus Chen's story is a reminder that one person, armed with determination and evidence and moral clarity, can stand against corruption and win, and in winning, can change the world.